Anime, manga, manhwa fans of turn-based and strategy RPGs, this is definitely the game for you. Today, I'm talking about the great Villainess, strategy of Lily. Now, I love me a Villainess. In more of a normie descriptor, a regular person would interpret that term as a female character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot. But, for my fellow anime/manhwa nerds, it refers to a very specific subgenre of story that typically features the female main character getting one-shot IRL by a truck and reincarnated into a video game or a novel as the story's main noblewoman villain. Most fans of the genre's first experience would likely be My Next Life as a Villainess, an anime that came out in 2020 where the protagonist gets reincarnated in her favorite dating sim and realizes she's the villain. Now, the villain in these stories are always projected to lose to the protagonist or heroine in a way that leads them to be executed or exiled. So in most of these stories, the viewer's protagonist, or the villainess, usually tries to do whatever it takes to avoid these things, leading to a lot of comical misunderstandings that work out. In the case of the great Villainess, there's no reincarnation, but the co-protagonist Scarlet Penrose is the most exaggerated form of a villainess to its fullest extent. She's incredibly eloquent and graceful in her speech, but also powerful and ruthless, to the point she doesn't care who she kills, and even in the tutorial, she's attempting to raze the capital of the kingdom to the ground. Now, why is she doing this? Well, it's because the crown prince is accusing her of murdering his father, the emperor, and thus, she's been sentenced to death. This game took me about 22-ish hours to complete on stream, with 5 different acts. And there are 2 different major endings depending on how you choose to play the game. More on that soon. Also, I'm going to get through all the major things you'd want to know if you're intrigued by the idea of playing this game for yourself and don't want serious spoilers in the beginning of the video. There will be a timestamp in the description on where that part ends, and my whole playthrough experience with spoilers begins. So, if you just want a general introduction that helps you understand whether or not you just want to buy the game, you can watch the video until this timestamp. Attempting to stop Scarlet from killing everyone is where we get introduced to the strategy elements and gameplay I think fans of Fire Emblem would really enjoy. But there's also another key game mechanic that gets introduced a little further in they would like as well. I'll get to that shortly. So in the beginning, you command Prince Gwyn and his retainers, getting brutally slaughtered by this insane woman with a pretty sexy laugh in my opinion. What? What? Oh, she killed all them cha-cha, she killed them! And that's when we're left with the other protagonist, Lily, who was introduced slightly before this. She's an engineer from the neighboring republic who came at the prince's request to livestream his wedding to Scarlet. Yes, guys, in her kingdom, they're a little more advanced in technology, and her live streams are both a main plot device in the story and mechanic in the game. Anyways, she wanted nothing to do with all this, but Scarlet kills her in cold blood. That's where we get taken to the Dead End Theater. She literally just killed everyone. Oh. And just like that, I died. Oh, what is this place? The Divine Theater, the perfect stage for a comeback. Divine? Comeback? As in, from death? If either of us bite it, we can come back here and start over again. We can also figure out what went wrong. I'm still very much alive though, oh my gosh. You killed me, you psycho! Isn't this my story? Oh, their fates are intertwined. Long live the Villainesses. Did you read the subtitle? I'm a main character too. Yes, guys, the name of the game is The Great Villainess, Strategy of Lily. They're 2 main characters. Oh, in short, neither of us can die. Now you're getting it. This place, you're going to be visiting a lot, provided you don't go into the system settings and change the game to easy mode. For a reason that's not really explained in the game's plot, the fates of both Scarlet and Lily are tied together, so if either of them die, it's game over. And we're here in this screen where the 2 of them basically quip back and forth on how they died and what happened. This game, by the way, has a lot of entertaining dialogue that really fleshes out the personality of the characters, so it's quite the treat for the player. Anyways, we come back from the dead-end theater, and that's where Lily gets desperate and summons her live stream blimp to escape. The prince and his guards see this as an act of rebellion and start accusing Lily of colluding with Scarlet. So she decides to live stream Scarlet to the whole nation in an attempt to expose international incident as a means of escape. Scarlet, in all her villainous glory, gives a speech where she basically tells them to trust what they see, not what they're being told. And she gains 1 follower and people start chatting up the live stream. Scarlet is directly challenging her crime of murdering the Emperor, and she and Lily fight Gwyn and his retainers. You learn here very quickly what Scarlet and Lily's dynamic is. Scarlet is a mindless beast, while Lily is a smug tactician, telling Scarlet to shut up and follow her orders. Scarlet at first doesn't want to listen, but Lily baits her with the one thing that excites her: violence. Towards the end of the fight, Scarlet is about to go berserk and kill everyone. Lily sees this and realizes, oh shit, killing a prince would be pretty bad, so she summons her blimp to bind him, and the 2 girls make an escape in a very dramatic fashion. Cue anime OP. What a Splatoon fan. Oh, we got the OP. Oh, gotta switch. Oh. Dang. Dude, the live stream part goes kind of hard, I'm not gonna lie. Yep, I think we're gonna have to kill them all, chat. We have to kill them for Scarlet. AOT opening vibes. Ooh. Dude, the art is so sick, actually. Oh, the music is good too. Okay, now that the 2 have escaped, they travel down towards the bottom peninsula of the kingdom. One cool part of this game is that even when you leave this part of the map, you will come back to it at some point. The whole game operates on one large map, just keep that in mind. Anyways, you're introduced to Yuisi, a bartender, and the leader of the Liberation Front that's rebelling against the Empire. The reason for this is that basically the Empire is very noble, aristocrat heavy in terms of power, but that's really kind of an unimportant side plot. After getting a challenge from him, you get hints about the 2 important routes you can take this story through, and more game mechanics. To explain how the game works quickly, there are your bases in red, enemy bases in blue, and untouched bases in gray. You can move from a red base to an adjacent base of any color, but if the base you move to is blue or gray, you'll have to spend a certain amount of turns to take it over to be able to move to the next base. You lose if Scarlet or Lily die, or if the main base gets fully taken over. Now, them just getting to your main base doesn't automatically end the game. They will have to sit on it for however many turns it takes to turn the base blue. In the beginning, the base is maxed at 5 stars, so they would logically have to sit on it for 5 turns. Not all bases have that many stars, by the way, and you don't have to max out the stars to move to the next adjacent base. You just need the base you're on to become red. Also, the numbers with the people icon represent how many units can sit on the base. The largest base can host 5 people, and the smallest can hold 1 person. Now, ending turn 3 after advancing a bit introduces the airship phase, which happens after the player phase and before the enemy phase. So, you can move the ship that displays a live stream. In this case, the first one is a live stream of Scarlet's riveting speech that stops the enemies in range from leaving their base at the cost of 1 energy that turn. You have 3 energy, and once it runs out, the airship will be inactive for one turn, and then the next airship phase, it'll recover all 3. You can also hit stop stream, and it'll recover 1 energy that turn. Also, acquired characters can give you new abilities. The second one we get as we approach Yuisi. This one is Lily's airship ability that has no energy cost. Any base within range will allow you to capture a capturable character. So I put the blimp over Yuisi and just need to bring him down to red like he's a Pokemon, then use Lily's capture ability in a manual battle. Oh, by the way, you can manual or auto battle using Delegate. Delegate basically has you battle, reducing yours and the enemy's HP without having to battle at all, but it doesn't necessarily mean the outcomes would have happened the same way as if you battled picking your own skills. It's mostly just a time saver, and in fact, was a detriment for my playthrough towards the end of the game, where you get overpowered skills that the auto battle just doesn't factor in. Also, the main enemy base respawns enemy units as long as some are already sitting inside, so it's something you have to juggle with as well. So eventually, I break through to Yuisi. It took me a little bit of XP farming, which is not great. In fact, you don't really get that much XP unless you kill the bigger squared units. When I reach him, I spend my first turn eliminating his cronies, and in the second turn facing him, it looks like the odds are completely against me. The whole map is surrounded by enemies, and even the auto battle trajectory made things look bleak. When I get to it, he nearly kills Scarlet. Oh, we're so close to dying. We're so close to dying, actually. But on my third battle, I get lucky. Oh, dude, I think I'm gonna die here. Okay, what order we go in? Okay, so he attacks second. Okay, boom. And then I can capture him. Okay, don't kill me, don't kill me. Okay, we're barely living. Let's go. Captured. Let's go. Get in. Get in the cage. Yup. Get in the cage, baby. Easy. Damn, I let him get too close. I can't get away. Yup, you can't. Get in the net. W. Now, capturing him brings me to the next 2 characters in Act 1. Baroness Colonel Gina Pepper, the commander of the Elysian Field Army, whose dream is to be moved from the peninsula to the main city, and her childhood friend and deputy commander, Baron Nicole. And if at first glance, looking at her, you assume she's a crazy woman, you'd be right. This game has a lot of hot, crazy women, but I would personally put her at the bottom of the list. Trust me guys, there are way hotter ones. Following their introduction, we finally get introduced to the other mechanic I think Fire Emblem fans would love: support conversations, or in this game, it's called building trust. Works mostly like how it does in Fire Emblem, where you build trust status between compatible units from C to S rank, although S rank doesn't necessarily result in a marriage ending for the characters in question. But it does reveal a lot more of how their relationships flourish and fleshes out each character a lot more. Also, very important to max out to S rank because it gives the 2 characters important team skills that are super OP, like you seriously want these skills. Scarlet and Lily of course have a lot of funny back and forth quips, but you also learn the little things, like Lily is a fan of reading smut light novels and writing fanfics. Characters like Gina and Nicole are childhood friends, which means we get towards the childhood lovers territory. This section is where I learned I would be restarting my game a lot. I didn't stun him. And got introduced to the idea of different endings. A great thing about this game is in addition to your own saves, it also autosaves timestamps of previous turns. So even if you have to reload because you messed up your positioning, you can go back to a not too far point. Anyway, I accidentally killed Nicole thinking I was going to capture him because the airship was positioned on his base. Unfortunately, he attacked my base, something you have to be observant of because that's not where the airship's AoE was placed on. Out of curiosity, what don't you like about him? Weak, no charm? Ooh. No ambition. Men of little import deserve none of my time. Bro, she's gonna kill him? Huh. Well, I won't certainly be pledging myself to you. I shall be Gina's right-hand man until my last breath. I hold no blame in my heart. After all, this is war. Dang, we killed him! No! Guys, I can't get the good ending. Dang. Mercilessly defeating enemies will hone Scarlet and company's battle skills. Will you slaughter them all to rise to the top as Demon Queen, or befriend them for the happy ending? The choice is yours. Ooh, dang, she gets a +10 for killing. By the end of the clip, we learn the more of these important units we kill, the stronger Scarlet and whoever's remaining will become, and thus will lead us to a sort of genocide route ending like in Undertale. I wanted to see more characters and their different supports though, so for this run, I just kept reloading to save everyone. Also, right after reloading, I get Yuisi killed. And this is where I learned everyone on your side can die and come back no problem. They just retreat for a few turns if defeated, and respawn at a main base of choice. Just not Scarlet and Lily, of course. Now, I want to give some quick thoughts that tie up this review section before I continue my experience. Gameplay? It's a lot of fun if you like strategy, turn-based type of gameplay. Most of the characters are fun, and it's enjoyable to see the different relationships that build up over the course of the story. You get a lot of exciting moments. And if you love hot anime girls with big boobs, and also ones with moe personalities, this game has it. There are some good-looking guys for the ladies, so trust me, they didn't forget you either. Music is also fun and fitting. I'll play a few tracks here for you to enjoy. So overall, if these things fit what you're looking for, get the game. $30 for 20 hours of a single playthrough, double the hours if you want a second ending. I think it's definitely worth it since Fire Emblem has kind of fallen off, but fans of the franchise like myself are still hungry for something. Now that that's out of the way, I'm going to continue with my experience. So, spoiler warning. If you don't want to be spoiled on what happens, stop the video here. But outside of spoilers, you can continue if you just want an act-by-act guide as you play. So, after reloading, I attempt to capture him again and get the dead-end theater where our protagonists quip. I then proceeded to make the big mistake in trying to capture Gina first, not understanding that the game literally tells you have to capture Nicole to capture her, so I end up wasting quite a bit of time. But soon after correcting my mistake, capturing Gina goes pretty smoothly. Okay. And then on stage. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, 1 HP. Get in. Get in. Get in. Get in the box. Yes! Got him! Then, the two childhood friends reunite, and Lily and Scarlet convince the two to join their rebellion in a comedic fashion, of course. With that, we liberate Elysia, and the free people hail Scarlet as their savior. Glory to her excellency and honor to Master Tactician Lily. Well, we conquered Elysia. Too late to go back now. Yeah, see? Bro, she literally doesn't even want to be here. Not that I would let you. I promised to abide by your orders after all. Yeah, Scarlet's literally like a brain-dead monster who only knows noble etiquette and killing. Nothing. I just didn't want to die. I mean, you can't fight morality. Besides, you obviously didn't do it. Like, not the fires or anything. What makes you think I'm innocent? If you did it, you'd have been shouting it from the rooftops. Oh, true. Dang, Lily knows. Good. You do get me. I agree. The righteous are too lofty. As a result, the world is too dull. I take it that you feel compelled to live according to their whims? Well, sure. We do live in a society. Wrong! If the world is boring when things are right, then I say do the opposite. There's no limit to starting over. Why live if there's no thrill to it? I guess. Allow me to lead by example then. Hand me my camera. Oh, what is she doing? Ooh. Citizens of the Empire, I challenge you to a duel. I declare the independence of Scarlet Landia. She's making her own country? Call it the Scarlet Empire or something. A respectable name. Also, I'm appointing you as our new chancellor. Oh. Seriously? No, what have I gotten myself into? Dang. We'll turn everything on his head. Let's make the world more fascinating. Yeah, she's crazy. Then, we turn to the former prince, now Emperor Gwyn, chatting with his retainers about how to stop Scarlet. And also, Gwyn receives a letter from the President of the Republic, Noah. He's actually quite important towards the tail end of the game, so you want to remember him. Shortly, we get introduced to the next mommy-looking character, Almeria, a kindly sister who serves the archpriest at the Imperial Church. She's known Gwyn since his princely days, and despite her description, I get suspicious of her very early on. To hold so much of your esteem, if you'll excuse me. She's secretly crazy too. There's a lot of crazy characters. Turning back to where we dominated Elysia and take it over as part of the Scarlet Empire, Scarlet is excited to kill the Emperor's forces in one fell swoop to the northwest, where the capital is. And we have quite a challenge to deal with. The newly constructed Great Wall with heavy cannons. Basically, a massive anti-us fortress. Beginning this chapter and advancing to the west ends Act 1 and begins Act 2. So I begin the act by going through the support mechanics. Gina and Nicole's is pretty cute because they like flip a coin and Nicole wins. And for winning, he's allowed to have Gina do whatever he wants. And she kind of exposes to the player that she's liked him for a long time. Then, in Scarlet and Lily's supports, which I go through C and B here. In C, Lily admits she feels like she can do anything around Scarlet. At this point, my chat is really shipping these two girls, already calling them by their ship name Scarly. In support B, Lily is scolding Scarlet for not putting out her laundry. But Scarlet has a bit of a hangover from drinking too much with the crew all night again. You get to see more of Lily's smug side through this, with her joking that Scarlet is going to drink the crew to death, and then proceeds to scold Scarlet more, telling her no drinking in her room, or she'll have to serve tea to everyone daily. Then, the two play with the idea that Lily would make a wonderful mother, and Scarlet asks Lily to be her wife, but Lily rejects her. Now, to the west, we have the three major characters to deal with. There's Prince Sieran, Gwyn's younger brother, and his aide, Tyler, who commands the 2nd Division and handles Sieran's day-to-day tasks. But before we get to them, we have to deal with Blabir, a gun genius and math nerd who commands the Great Wall. And spoiler, Lily knows who she is. Blabir is one of her older sisters. We get Gina's airship skill. At first, I didn't really use it, but late game, I absolutely had to. This section was quite a challenge in a few different ways. For one, there are 3 bases on the map that blast you if you sit on them, and the blast takes out nearly all of your HP. And second, these big cloaked units are for the most part faster and stronger than yours. I eventually break through by taking over the surrounding area that Gina gives us access to, and break through the front area. Sadly though, capturing Blabir doesn't mean you get her right here. She comes back to you right before the final act. Then, with the takeover of the Great Wall, the prince calls his overwhelming reinforcements. To this, Scarlet suggests finding out how to weaken them by capturing a local, and that's where we get introduced to Rebecca. She's an antisocial country weirdo who wears a mascot mask, but is a talented singer and dancer. Having seen the live streams and our growing following, she's quite scared of Scarlet. And with her capture, she explains a piece of land nearby with a cannon that can shoot down the west side. We take over the Greybolt Manor and fire the Dragon's Nest, nuking Tyler's forces. Bombing preparations complete. We're going for the Dragon's Nest base. Oh. Ready? Aim? Dang. Oh, he just blew him up. Bro, look. Bro got cooked. No, Tyler! What's wrong? What's going on? Emergency, all hands on deck. The stronghold has sustained heavy fire. Part of the fort are ablaze. I repeat, parts of the fort are ablaze. It was bombed, but from where? They made it to the plateau? How? The comms are a mess. Dang, they're cooked. Damage report. No, it's no use. Evacuate. Yes. Huge. Eventually, I take out Tyler because I need him first to capture Prince Sieran. Now, these two are pretty much implied gay for each other. You can see that through their early support conversations where Lily even jokes about the shippers wanting them together, as well as look through the character bios, where Tyler shares the fact he likes muscular men. However, I never finished their S-rank support, so I don't know if they're actually together. Capturing Sieran is quite the dramatic affair. He's your typical masculine and honorable man. And with that, we capture West Midland, the area right below the capital, and that ends Act 2, and we move to Act 3. It's nighttime. Scarlet explains her father, Duke Penrose, could have probably eliminated them anytime he wanted to, and apparently his combat style is just as vicious as Scarlet's. We suddenly get ambushed by some enemy forces that Scarlet doesn't believe belong to her father, since he usually doesn't attack first. So, our side plans to defeat and unmask them. We get Sieran's stream skill to start, that allows units in range to move 2 extra spaces, and the range is big. However, our enemies are scary. By delegating, most of my characters get one shot, especially if they team up. So, I solve this by isolating the enemies and picking them off one by one. And oh man, all of them sacrifice themselves in story after you defeat them, and the last enemy alerts more enemy forces headed by Scarlet's father. And another one of them is one of Lily's sisters. So, opening up to the right side of the map, which houses the Penrose domain, the layout seems pretty simple. To make it to the Penrose estate, we have to break through these small 1 to 2 person bases to advance upwards. Well, this assessment is completely wrong, because breaking through 3 spaces upwards, we get ambushed by the Duke's forces. Duke Eldred Brown Penrose is a masculine, honorable leader, with sparkling iris and strand of red hair to let us know he's definitely Scarlet's father. And man, Lily wants nothing to do with his family squabble, or the fact that he's mad, thinking his daughter murdered the Emperor who was one of his dear friends. This section is a very slow churn, but we get introduced to the Duke's right-hand man, Sanjay, but more importantly, his little sister Carmine, the Lady of House Maple. I like how her design is just the Canadian flag. Anyways, after seeing the first livestream, she became a total Scarlet stan. So much that her support conversations with her brother is just explaining stan culture and attempting to convert him into a Scarlet stan as well. So, capturing her allows us to capture Sanjay, but along the way, I get Scarlet and Lily's S-rank support. Now, proposals aside, it gives us access to one of the most broken skills in the game. Hold Me to Thy Bosom is a unison skill that changes Scarlet's type, boosts her attack by 75% and defense by 50%. And Scarlet hits all the enemies for 1.5 times damage plus 50% chance to stun. This move saved my game in the late chapters. Now, before I can even get to Sanjay, Duke Penrose summons his left hand, Erla, the other one of Lily's older sisters. She's more of a Wild West gunslinger type, and even worse, she's going for a dirty tactic, spawning near our main base that if she captures, it's game over for me. First, I capture Sanjay, which puts both him and Carmine on my team. And then, I make my way down using Sieran's skill. And by that time, Erla has hit my main base, where she has a passive that takes 2 stars per turn. So I only had 3 turns to reach her at this point. I beat her, no big deal. And just like Lily's other sister, I needed to capture her, but she won't join us until right before the final act. Dealing with Duke Penrose is tough. He gets a 30% power boost from defending a base because of his passive. I try to tackle this using 2 sets of teams, but the first team pretty much does nothing. I eventually break through after reloading using the Scarlet and Lily unison skill, and the father and daughter have a heartwarming reunion, kind of. He actually already knew the accusations about her regicide and arson were false, but was willing to capture her to honor his dead friend. the previous Emperor Alex, and the will of the Empire that still believed Scarlet was guilty. He doesn't even care about their family name, and in fact, was already one of Scarlet's subscribers. He just had to follow orders, since being a duke came with strings attached, but just wished Scarlet wouldn't bring up her dead mother into their little quip. Following that, in the capital, we are introduced to Marquess Primula Greybolt, a both sexy and beloved noblewoman of the Empire. Act 4 begins with her calling out to the people of the country using a live stream of her own. Much like Scarlet, she wants to improve the ability of women to move up in the country. Her compassionate speech that calls the people to defend Emperor Gwyn against the wicked Scarlet Penrose reaches the hearts of people all around. One reluctant to join the fight being Harold Morris, a retired war veteran who is old buddies with Scarlet's dad, also known as the Demon Commander of the Army Band. Now, before we get to fighting Primula, I noticed the condition to capture someone named Jane before I can capture her, meaning they were probably going to ambush somewhere since Jane hadn't appeared on the map yet. Okay, how do I capture them all? Capture Jane, then Primula. Capture Harold. Okay, so I can just capture... Bro, who's Jane? Bro, they're about to introduce a third unit. Primula gives her next rallying speech, and we get a flashback to her talking to Gwyn's twin guards, and it's apparent Primula already knows the accusations against Scarlet are false, but has to go through with fighting, since no one really has any proof yet. With the second speech, as I predicted, they ambush me, and in one of the bases spawns Primula's loyal maid, Jane Snowflake. Bro, he just snuck up on me? What? Wait, she's overturning our people? Well, this is cheating! Oh my god. A bunch of bases just changed alliances? Primula's popular? Bro, she like a celebrity? Oh my god. Ah, okay. The hour of the Protectorate War Angels is upon you. Ooh. Oh, dang. She's like a muscular mommy. Jane Snowflake. She used to be Primula's maid and trusted bodyguard? Wait, what? Do those two jobs usually go together? She's like uber feminine, so I'm guessing she's into knitting, embroidery, gardening, you know, those kinds of girly things. What? I'll stain your lovely outfit black. What the heck? Anyways, I decide to trickle down to the middle to deal with her first, and would you know it? She almost kills me because I put the capture blimp in the wrong space, thinking she wouldn't approach me because most of the bosses never approach you first. You're gonna be back later? Later, Mimi. That scream. Bro, why does her pixels got mad jiggle physics? What the heck? Yes. Caught her. Get in the cage. He's changed her an affront to my dignity. Kill me. That's new. Have you ever done any acting? I'm sorry my suffering amuses you. I've been nothing but loyal to the Greybolt house for more than a decade. You're that maid of hers. Primula used to call you her knight. Wait, what? I shan't entertain you any further. This humble one has a task to complete. Just listening to the clip and reading the dialogue, you can pick out that Jane is being a bit dramatic. And there's a reason for that. So, Jane shrugs off the chains and escapes. Primula does another speech, creating more units for me to deal with. And I have to go capture Jane again. She makes her approach towards us, and upon capturing again, we've done what we needed to convince her to join our side until we catch Primula. But if taking over all my hard-earned bases I had my units sit in for many turns wasn't enough, Emperor Gwyn enters the fray. He pretty much just takes over the bottom left and sits there, allowing me to go deal with Primula. In fact, his capture condition of befriending all the enemy generals first makes it clear that he's just there to pretty much annoy me but not leave his designated area. Now, one thing I hadn't been attentive to was the fact that Primula started moving. She took over one of my major bases. Fighting her, they do their little conversation, and in my first attempt, she kills me. I tried to figure out something, moving my units around and delegating, but it was 5 hours and 23 minutes I had been streaming on this second day of gameplay, so I decided to break for the day and try again the next. Okay, so still on Act 4, on the third day of me playing the game, I decided to use a file that was a few autosaves back so that I could prevent Primula from taking over my big base. I divide forces into 3 parts, where I have a few units dealing with the Emperor's forces to the left, Scarlet and Lily on the right, trickling up to capture Herald, and most importantly, a big portion of my team holding down the base Primula took over at the end of day 2. It was crucial that I hold this spot down since it could hold 5 units. And something I didn't mention earlier, but was pretty important, is that base type and star amount affect unit HP recovery per turn. So she was actually healing a lot sitting in this base. First, capturing Herald, the 2 old men of the party reminisce on their war days, whatever. But his capture was more relevant than I thought, since some of the more powerful units got weakened and demoralized. Ooh, I demoralized them? Oh, they're turning normal. Yes. Oh, my follower count. Oh, 380k. Wow. That aside, Primula was still annoyingly strong, nearly wiping out the units I had sitting on the base. So I solved this by moving Scarlet and Lily into the spot she was attacking, and capture her in this one try. Now, her relationship with Scarlet is quite stimulating. Here, watch this clip. Oh, another scene like this? Oh my god. Yeah, bro. Scarlet is undeniably gay. Yup. Why have you not changed at all, Lady Greybolt? I don't have as much freedom as you suspect. Lily keeps me in line. Does she now? The world may desire me, but the only one I care to indulge is Lily. Oh. If she wishes... Oh, so if she wishes, you may join us, Primula? Dang, what is with these spicy lines? Well, what if I ask you to choose between Miss Lily and I? Oh, dang. It's getting crazy. I would pick you both. Oh, Scarlet's a greedy woman. How is that fair? Yeah, so in short, Primula wants Scarlet while Scarlet wants Lily, but wouldn't mind Primula as a third party if Lily didn't mind. Spicy gay love triangle aside, to the west, some undercover noblemen are getting slain by a powerful assassin unit. And Gwyn's 2 guards witnessed it, and wanted to find a way to get this info to Scarlet, that they knew someone behind the scenes was the puppet master, pulling them all by the strings. As one would guess, I get to the twins and capture them, and we learn that the assassins are from the Republic, Lily's country. Now, the assassin guy is a little tough. He actually wipes me out in my first attempt, but I make quick work of him shortly. The next challenge would be Emperor Gwyn, whose forces had a strong grip on the left side of the country. Luckily, having Primula gave the airship a very important ability. At the cost of 2 energy, I can turn any enemy base into a 1-star version of my own, provided the bases weren't special, denoted by these 2 icons here. Turning the bases behind the prince into red means the enemies on them can't move forward until they're blue again. And also, something I didn't touch up on, but is a big mechanic in the game, is that you can only heal if your bases connect to the main base. So isolating him means he can't heal. And I get him here. His 2 retainers relay to him what's been going on behind the scenes, so he follows a plan hatched up by Lily. The next day, it's reported he breaks out of jail and puts Scarlet to the guillotine for inciting the Empire's riot. Only, this is all a guise to capture the real mastermind. The 2 ex-couple go back and forth in front of the entire nation until... Ooh, the mastermind. Okay, here we go. Push the prince into the thing. Wait! The mastermind was the hot nun? Sister Almeria? Oh, she's crazy too. Yup, here it is. I didn't think it was her though. But it's true, she hasn't been here the entire time. Oh my god! Dang. You, my dear, have a heart riddled with mistakes. Dude, she's real. Dude, how many insane women are in this game? Oh man, Almeria is crazy and hot. Something about moles on central areas just stimulates my brain. and my chat was going crazy for her too. The main cast was not so crazy about her, and despite Almeria being a tool of the Republic, because of the influence Scarlet had on Lily, they'd work together to stop her, making Almeria crash out. There, you see? That's why I chose her. Great voice acting too. This game? Oh, she's crashing out. She's crashing out. Oh. Oh, now she's playing. She's like a pick-me. She crashed out and she's like, oh, dear citizens, our Emperor Gwyn is aiding and abetting this traitor. Can you acknowledge such a profound failure as your leader? Of course not. Lend me your strength and I'll lead us to our proper future. She and her entourage spawn surrounding the capital with some menacingly glowing units. However, this is where Lily's sisters come back onto the scene, joining our team since we captured them in the previous chapters. And they kind of hint at the fact they would have been on Almeria's side had we not convinced them previously. Now, before I get to fighting Almeria, who is unfortunately not a capturable unit, I gotta go through some of the support combos. There were 3 pairs that intrigued me the most. Firstly, Lily and Emperor Gwyn. I wanted to see if they'd have some kind of romance, but it was just comical friendship. He finds her fanfic writing book, and she's embarrassed about it. So she spends pretty much all of their support convos trying to get it back from him, without him realizing it's hers, while he reads it little by little every convo, completely aloof and critiquing the writing for being underwhelming. The smut portions kind of fly over his head, but overall, their friendship is really entertaining. The second being Scarlet and Primula. You see, Scarlet loves beauty, be it man or woman, but prefers women a bit more. But of course, it's established she already wants to marry Lily. Primula differs from the other women in this game, being more aloof, straight in mannerisms, and graceful. She wants Scarlet, but ultimately gets rejected. The third being Gwyn and Primula, which kind of piggybacks off of the previous support pair. Since the two aren't engaged to anyone, Gwyn ends up proposing to Primula, and she actually settles, mostly because she doesn't mind him. He's still a respectful guy, but she also knows she has no chance with Scarlet. So it's kind of like a, you're not bad, I guess we can marry. All 3 of these, in fact, and max support combos in general, give really powerful skills. I spent a good 30 or so minutes slowly chipping at the forces surrounding Almeria. Good thing about her is she doesn't ever leave her base. Bad thing is her squad of 4 soldiers will always respawn, so you kind of have to kill her in one turn. A way I dealt with it though was using Emperor Gwyn's airship skill. It removes any non-boss enemy from any base and range at the cost of 2 energy. However, Almeria is still tough, so much that a second or third team is almost completely useless, and there's no real way to farm XP to power up, so I had to play my cards right with Scarlet and Lily. It took a lot of attempts. Oh yes, oh dude, okay, I win. I literally win. Yep, I win. Yeah, go ahead, kill her. No more counters. Attack, defense speed down. That's fine. Wait, what? Oh, because Scarlet was stunned. I got cheated. Ah! It did work. No, wait. Oh my god, it's not enough. Bro, I gotta load again. Okay, no, I have the tactic. I have the tech. How many times have Comfy lost? Shh. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about how many times it is. Because either way, I'm gonna come out with the dub. Oh, dude, I don't have enough. Oh, bro, I'm just barely missing enough. Let this be it. Poetic way to end. Yes! W! To think that such worthless pawns would rebel. I shall not yield, I'll never acknowledge you. As if we cared for your opinion. Especially since you're not going to be around for much longer. Yup. But that wouldn't be the end of the trouble she'd cause. She ends herself, signaling the main forces of the Republic to come attack the country, and they seize the main base. Things get sticky through all this. However, our protagonists still have time to find love. How does it look? They're landing at Rosalia. What are we gonna do? Our hands are tied up. We'll move our base to the city. Surely Gwyn won't mind. Dang, she promised she'd show Lily a fabulous world. You're fighting for a reason so vague even your advisor can't voice it. Fine, in that case, Lily, be my wife. Ooh. Excuse me? What? You can't be serious. No, I am. Very much so. The more absurd something sounds, the more serious Scarlet tends to be. Therein lies the problem. Really, it's nothing but trouble. To be fair, marrying a woman in our current society would be laughable. However, the Scarlet Empire welcomes any and all desires. Whatever people wish to achieve will be lauded instead of scorned. And I want to wed you, Lily. Oh. So, since I supposedly wear the pants, that'd make me your husband? Oh, she wears the pants in this? Are you hearing this, Duke Brown? Your daughter? Dang, he's a proud father. He doesn't care. My little Scarlet's going to be a bride. Like father, like daughter. Oh, for the love of... This is meant to be a serious discussion. Dang. The hour grows late. We'll head to the city tomorrow. After a heartwarming marriage proposal from Scarlet, pre-Act 5 begins at night, where Lily sneaks away from the main part and reveals her true identity to the player. She's the daughter of the Republic's president, who was sent here to actually overtake Almeria's position one day, but wasn't ready because she's physically a lot weaker. We get some backstory on how the Republic is a dystopian nation. Her father had imbued the ideals of everyone being equal cogs in the system, and he was the one who set up this whole thing to frame Scarlet for murdering the Emperor and would overtake the country in the aftermath. Where, since he had great success in brainwashing his citizens to be happy drones and only think the right thoughts, he thought he could do the same to this country. So he's one of those villains who wants to do good, but just approaches things from a morally questionable angle. And with Lily's exposition ending, we begin the final act. The next day begins with Gwyn vowing to fulfill his father's will in protecting the Empire. But they'd be quickly alerted that the Republic had taken over the country, and they were completely surrounded. President Noah then hijacks the stream. Oh, this is Lily's dad? What do we think, guys? Dang, they gave him the deep voice guy too. He sounds like Kotamine Kire from Fate. I'm the Republic's president, Noah. My dad worked to make the Republic the mighty nation it is today in just one generation. The county's technology increased by leaps and bounds, which also reinforced his rule. He's a monster for a president, so it's no wonder he's worshipped. Smash? Ooh, man. I, for one, cannot sit idly by while innocents are being sacrificed. The Republic is here to provide aid and restore civic order, and he's live streaming. Yup. He's gonna capture and execute Scarlet to provide peace. Me too? Lily's dad is hot? After his speech declaring he'll be capturing and executing Scarlet, Lily makes her move. She plays the smug girl she's been to her crew, but on the inside, she knows she's just running away from Scarlet, believing she's unworthy having lied about her identity the entire time. She hijacks the stream back, telling everyone that Scarlet showed her love the Republic never did, and she declared she'd be stopping her father. However, Noah was cold, telling his men the woman on air was impersonating Lily, and sensible insurgents should lay down their arms and surrender. Whoa! Yo! The whole map is taken over by the Republic, and we have to rescue Lily. But for some reason, both Primula and Jane are missing from our side. I take my first turn trying to advance towards her, but the enemies begin their attack. When all hope is lost, Jane and Primula make their entrance, having followed Lily. And Primula gets on live stream to taunt Scarlet, joking she's taken her wife into custody. It takes me a few minutes, but I eventually reach where the trio was enclosed. It's no use. We can't give up. I'm certain that Scarlet's moments away. Dang. Oh, she's going crazy. Get out of my way. You certainly are a popular one, Lily. Mind that doesn't go to your head. Huh, I thought I was gonna die. Even now, heroines can be late, though I did cut it somewhat close. Thank you, Primula and Jane, for keeping Lily safe. Oh, I'm glad to see you unharmed as she hugs her. Ooh. Oh, dang. Why did you? Must you ask, my dear? I'm wounded. Do you truly think so little of me? I finally said it. I finally told my dad to piss off all the way. He's not the boss of anyone. Ooh, she's getting emotional. Dang, she's gonna stay with Scarlet forever, guys. Can I still be your hubby? Dang. The couple has an emotional moment where Lily begs to stay Scarlet's hubby since earlier she mentioned wanting to be the one who wore the pants in the relationship. We then issue a challenge to Noah. Ooh, okay. Did I have to recapture it all? Oh my god. Since he had a little under 10 times the followers we had, it looked a bit daunting with the entire map, and all my work securing the bases completely erased. But the more enemies I defeated and bases I captured, the higher my followers increased while his decreased, and the stronger my units got. At this point, I was a little overwhelmed, having streamed for 5 hours on the 3rd day, so I called it and decided I'd finish on day 4. Oh boy, what can I say? I was on stream for the final act for 5 hours and 24 minutes, taking way longer than I needed to. If you're following the video along at this point for guide purposes, the biggest tip I could give is number 1, don't auto battle, follow the timestamp I have listed. It'll take you to the exact part that saved my game when I learned manual battling is OP. Number 2, farm unison support skills. But just note the most important I used was Lily and Scarlet's. Now, the approach I took was having 3 decent units guard the bottom bridge to the capital, while my main forces went out and chipped to the right. My thought process being, the bases below the capital had too many guys to deal with. Although, you could probably approach it using Gwyn's skill that removes non-boss type enemies. Capturing the Penrose estate on the right was just a start. And this is where I ran into my first, seemingly hopeless challenge. The 2 spots where Primula and Harold used to be. These bases were loaded with the toughest assassin type units, who for the most part were faster than even my best characters, Scarlet and Lily. At the same time, I was having a team on the bottom deal with the isolated area we used to take care of Tyler, because this base constantly spawned new guys who would trek around the map. Also, at the same time, the area below the capital started moving up, so I had to reposition a lot of my guys. I moved Lily and Scarlet back to the capital and had a strong set of units right below take care of the capital enemies, while leaving a weaker set of my own to guard Penrose estate. I break through the bottom using Primula's airship to take over a large set of bases, and then I actually used Gina's skill, a total lifesaver by the way, suggested by a viewer who was playing the game at the same time. It stops the enemies in range from healing. After gaining control of the left, I go back to tackle the right. I get Primula's old base, but man, looking at where Harold used to sit, this one boss seemed like way too much. This is where the viewer Captain Comrade from before reminded me about Gina's airship skill, and cutting him off from healing, I took it over. This was a big moment for the crew, having captured 4 major bases, so Scarlet had to rally up our units, and with the power of friendship, we were gonna win. I still kinda struggled for a whole nother hour to make progress, like literally. For the next hour that followed Scarlet's speech, I couldn't make it down to Elysia to deal with Lily's dad, until this happened. That's what it is. Okay, I should have tried to fight him this entire time. Press A to bet that he would lose, press B to win. Dude, I could have just fought him myself and taken over this entire time. I literally wasted so much time on this. Believe it or not, 4 hours and 20 minutes into my final stream of the game is when I realized I was way more OP manual battling compared to auto battling because of individual and unison skills. I eventually break through with my 5 best units: Scarlet, Lily, Primula, Gwyn, and Erla. On the left, I break through with everyone else, and fighting Lily's father is a walk in the park afterwards, where you have to defeat him twice. I'm going to let the gameplay finish out from here, so stay tuned if you want to see the beautiful good ending where, spoiler, Scarlet and Lily get married. But before I go, remember to like and subscribe, comment down below to engage the algorithm. That way I can afford to keep making content like this. And when you finish, hey, watch another video. I'll see you all in the next one. Alright, let's go. Dang, I never imagined you would have built such a following. I'll admit, there were even distinct disturbances within our own army. So, my dad might be down, but he'll never be out. Capture's not an option. How could I? I fight for happiness. Any impediments must be removed. This guy's crazy. Crazy and brutal. Then you see it says compelling obstacles. What of it? You recognize your own child's talents as if even subconsciously. Dang, how absurd. Lily is irreplaceable, a true masterpiece in my opinion. Indeed, we were too rigid of our evaluation of Lily's worth, but we identified as the true threat was you, Scarlet. That's why you try to get people to break us up, even my sisters. Your inherent synergy was a grave miscalculation, I must admit. That's Lily's dad? Yes. Which is why we'll be entering into a union that even God cannot break. Sorry, Dad. I told Scarlet that I'd marry her. My apologies for the delayed announcement, but we are to be wed. What the? Such disruptions to the population must be removed forcefully if required. Huh. What little character you have. Hardly a man worth of being Lily's father. Let them be gay. Ooh, I barely do any damage at all. Oh! Oh, I stunned. Comfy should be in theater. Ironically, I was not in theater ever. Dude, I do like no damage. It's the final turn too. Okay, well, let's see if Squad 2 can kill him. Come on. Yes! Dang, nothing matches our simulations. Every calculation is failing. What does this mean? How could we lose with our superior technology? Something is certainly gone amiss. I refuse to bow before the Empire. Reshuffle units, move the wounded, able-bodied, prepare to march. Wait, it's not over? No, they can't be. Using violence to alter the status quo? What a barbaric solution. Weeding out those of inferior intelligence is also a leader's duty. No, are you kidding me? For the sake of all humanity, you shall be eradicated. He's not phase 2? Well, I got scammed. Injured units are replaced, remobilized as battle dictates. Bro. Oh, and they're playing the theme song? What? One-shotted? Okay, so I just get big chip. So these guys do big chip, and then I finish them off with main. Wait, no, let's sacrifice these guys. Yeah, I could literally win here, but I'm gonna do it in battle because that'll make it more epic. Just give up already. Why are you so obsessed with the Empire? This is no mere obsession. It's a necessary measure for the greater. Cease your endless prattle. Quite frankly, I find your existence offensive. As if you know any better. How dare you lead people down a thorny path? Roses are more beautiful for their barbs. Unless you can wrap your mind around the truth, you'll never be my match. Bro, him cutting my speed is so annoying. Watch him just kill Scarlet here. Nope, got him. You have no soldiers? No reservists? No more tanks to send out? It's curtains for you. Impossible. How could our modern arms be defeated by such outdated systems? Time to take your bow, Dad. Your role's done here. Ooh. How does it feel to be bested by the talent of the daughter you denied? Time do you answer for your crimes? Arson, regicide, and inciting chaos. All reasonable measures to be taken in the name of peace and prosperity. What's there for me to deny between violence and logic? Neither is truly rational. Why question either? I do not believe my choices were incorrect. I respect this man, even though he's got some funky earrings. What do you want to do with him, Gwyn? He did your family the dirtiest. Which is why I shouldn't cast judgment. I'd be too furious to think straight. None of this would have happened if I hadn't introduced my father to that streaming technology. Out of everyone, I'm most to blame. Guys, streams are what killed his dad. Why the dad be looking... What about you, Lily? No matter what you choose, I'll support you. You want me to decide? We have a recorded confession from the president regarding his infiltration. As such, the rest of the Republic would not be held responsible. It's a matter between two family members. Well, You know the dad is hot. With that, the curtain closed on our year-long struggle. Exposing the Republic's attempts to meddle with the Empire sent shockwaves. Ex-Emperor Alex ended up going down in history as a hero who did his best. Thanks to the whole issue, the rotten nobles, the previous parliament was a shambles, so Gwyn had to step up and work out the whole transfer power to the Scarlet Empire, but... Oh, we own his empire now. Oh, never mind. Okay. You left the government to Scarlet or Lily? Dang. So they're running the government. Women hold positions of power. Oh, guys. They brought gays and they brought feminism. Dang. The dawn of a new era. A grand celebration, okay. Oh, wedding? My daughter's finally dressed in wedding finery. Now I can head to the great beyond without any regrets. Are those tears of relief? Mother would have stern words for us. This would make her smile. Elizabeth. I love how dramatic he is, Elizabeth. Can you forgive me? Dude, what a good father. Well, actually, he almost tried to kill us, but yeah. Hi, Star. Bro, it's the furry. Sorry to have taken so long. I don't really mind, but everyone's here. Dang, he's the officiant? The bartender? Yeah, we're gonna get a wedding PNG. Do you promise to take your wife through fires, seas of blood, or enemy raids? Of course. Chancellor Lily, do you promise to love your wife in battle, above the clouds, or on the air? Who even wrote these vows? I did. Because the usual ones be too bland, huh? Should have seen that coming. It's fine. I do. Yep. 3 cheers for the Scarlet Empire. Thank you, Lily. We just made the world that much more thrilling. Really? That's the line you're ending this on? Oh, 아이시테루 yo. Oh! Wow, guys. Wow. Wow. So cute. Dude, I wish I could hide the thing. But I think they're covering her lack of panties. Or maybe her panties are up there. Who knows? What a good shot. Our journey's just getting started. Yes! Oh my god! Finally. Finally finished. Yay, your queens. This was such a good game. But I gotta imagine things would be different if I just killed everyone too. Because there is a route where you kill everyone. So I have to wonder how things would change if that were the case. And Scarlet gets every buff. With every person you kill, Scarlet gets stronger and stronger. Okay, let's see this. So, that's it. A rather fitting finale, I'd say. Do you believe you'd found our happy ending? As long as we're not counting all the times we screwed up. I thought we were gonna die, lots. There were so many reckless attacks. We got cut off from our allies, no one would listen to us. However, we made it in the end, which is all that matters. You thought it would be impossible, didn't you? People assume without reason and judge things to be absurd. I really did. I didn't believe that happy endings actually existed, and yet here we are. Look there. That person never stopped believing in us. And lo, we exactly what we set out to do. Let's stream the story of our trio's mighty accomplishments. Oh, they're talking about me? Happy ending achieved. Dang, I didn't get the bad ending, guys. The bad ending where Scarlet just kills everyone and goes berserk.